Hi everyone, welcome to our office. So we're very excited today because we're going to have two panels. The first panel is about managing ETH staking infrastructure at scale. So it's Ernest from our team, Kiln, moderating, then Colin from Obol Network, Seb from Kiln, Elias, very good friend of mine, from Raiden Network, and Alon from SSV. And the second panel, so I think there will be a small break between the two panels, but second panel is all about the merge with Georgios, Paradigm, Stefan, Flashbot, Vasily from Lido, Justin Drake, I've seen him from the Ethereum Foundation, and Nico from Alluvio. So without further ado, let's go for the panel. Ernest?
Thank you, sir. Hi, everyone. Hey, hey, hey. Always wanted to do that. This was my chance. So just to recap, so we have Colin, who's CEO and founder of Obol Network, building distributed validator technology, previously leading product strategy at Consensus. Next to him is Sébastien Ranou from the Kiln team, leading our infrastructure on Ethereum. We have Elias Simos next to him, who's co-founder and CEO at Raiden Network, building reputation for machines, and he'll tell you more about what that means. I should probably sit down. And finally, we have Alon who's project lead at SSV Network and CEO at Block Staking. So thank you all for coming. It's great to have you all. To kick things off, I wanted to start with Sébastien and ask you a bit about if you can talk through what it's like to run Ethereum infrastructure, staking infrastructure at scale today, and then we use that as a jumping off point to talk about some of the projects we have on the panel today.
Sure. So basically, when it comes to like running validators at scale, you can see it as like three different layers. Like there is like the validator layer, where you have like validators who have to attest. Send attestations every 6 minutes. Then you have like the consensus layer, which is usually represented by beacons, and so the validators are connected to those beacons. So the beacon is like responsible of like the beacon chain, so making sure that the rules of the protocol are followed and that the state of the network is well preserved. And then there is the last part, which is the execution layer, where blocks are being built and transactions are executed. And so yeah, like you have like this architecture that can come in different flavors with like all of those components. And then you have basically two risks to make sure you handle well. One is like downtime risk. So like if a validator goes down, you are going to lose attestations on the network and get small penalties with time. And the second one is like slashing, and like to get slashed because basically it's a bit more difficult, hopefully. So it usually happens when operators make mistakes, like when they run two validators at the same time or this kind of stuff. So there is some sort of tension between the two risks because if you try to target for 100% reliability and like zero downtime, you're going to like put probably like fallbacks, this kind of stuff. So you are going to increase the risk of being slashed because you will have keys in different places and this kind of stuff. Yeah, so yeah, that's basically it.
Maybe we can jump off to Elias. So Elias, can you talk us through how your project helps monitor the performance of validators and what you think is needed in the staking industry?
Sure. So maybe it's worth talking a little bit as to kind of like why, right? And what's the motivation behind kind of like doing what we're doing and what we've built so far and what we hope we will build, which is I used to work at a company called Bison Trails that was later acquired by Coinbase, and then we basically operated in this infrastructure space. We built a very large platform for operating validators, well, one of the biggest in Ethereum, but also other networks. The problem that I kept kind of stumbling along there is that I couldn't tell how well we were performing compared to the rest of the network. Like, where do we sit? What's our context? And then there's a lot of interesting things that you can learn from this. And I kept stumbling across the same problem over and over again. And the other, a little bit more insidious thing was that there was almost unbounded subjectivity in how people measured things like performance, right? So you would ask N operators, and you'd probably get like N different answers about, hey, we're measuring rewards, or hey, we're measuring uptime. And in fact, the answer is actually not probably any of the two. And it's a combination of things. And so once you kind of like start standardizing and providing like a level of transparency and easy access to data and great context around all of that stuff, you can come up with great insights that help everybody sort of rise to the top, right? And so, funny, Seb was talking about slashing before, and we had a conversation yesterday about how we've created this thing called the effectiveness rating, which is basically kind of taking away kind of the randomness from the rewards print, which you could use to kind of like track how a validator is performing. It's kind of focusing on the signal only according to how you perform your consensus functions as a validator. And it's a toy sort of research blog that we haven't really published yet, but we found that the few validators that have been slashed on the Beacon chain, which is about 200 right now, were exhibiting like significantly lower median in their lifetime of the effectiveness rating. And the week before they got slashed, they all started actually deteriorating. So, and they started deteriorating not in an absolute sense, but in a relative sense to the network median, right? So the negative spread started increasing. So we think that there's a lot more to uncover there, and but it's already like super interesting.
So basically kind of suggests that operators are like, I don't know, seeing something going bad on the infrastructure and trying to respond to it, and maybe like moving keys left and right, and then you get slashed because you missed something, or?
It's possible. It's possible. And the truth of the matter is that we won't like really know until we have like this kind of like data layer and this context to actually be able to align with one another, especially in a globally distributed system. I think it's quite important.
Very cool. So let's bring in Colin and Alon. So we have the two leading projects doing distributed validator technology, right? So today in the setup that Sebastian described, there is the validators hold the validator key, and that introduces some risks. So you guys are working on new infrastructure, new paradigm for this. So maybe we could start with you, Colin, and then go to Alon. If you could talk a bit through the problems you guys are solving and sort of where you are on that journey.
So a quick intro to DVT with an analogy that's super high level for everyone. You can think of it like an airplane. So if you're flying in an airplane and one of your engines like stops working, the airplane doesn't crash. Today, that's like what we need to migrate validators towards. Today, when you're running a validator, the only way to back yourself up is through a thing called active-passive redundancy, which means you put your key in two places at the same time. One is online, one is offline. If both of those things come online at the same time, well, you get slashed, right? So when running infrastructure at scale, having automated backups is like essentially breaking the rule. So what we want to migrate DVT to and like have it become is similar to like how airplanes are constructed today, but for a validator node.
Awesome. And Alon, maybe you could take us through your view on the problem and also a bit about where your project is at.
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of different problems we're all facing, and in general, DVT SSV tries to solve. So we talked about redundancy, backup, and slashing. Those are kind of the low-hanging fruit. That's fine. But we also need to talk about the greater systemic risk on Ethereum moving towards what it seems to be a very centralized market. Maybe you guys can someday have the statistics, but kind of subjectively, I think that probably 10 infrastructure operators today run probably 80 to 90% of the entire stake. So the systemic risk on Ethereum is pretty large. If one of them fails, it's very significant. And so I think that moving towards something like SSV DVT is the idea that you eliminate a single point of failure. Other than the low-hanging fruit like DevOps things, how do you make your infrastructure better? How do you make the entire thing better? So that's one thing. The second thing that is very much complementary is how do you make infrastructure reusable? Because if it's very hard to create infrastructure, it doesn't matter if you have 10 or 12 operators or staking infrastructure. You need 100, you need 200, you need 300. And so in order to have a lot of those operators and infrastructure providers online, you have to have it very easy to and very usable to create infrastructure and use that infrastructure in order to, again, reduce the systemic risk on Ethereum in general. Yeah.
Makes sense. So our overall theme here is the merge, right? The merge is coming. We have a very large font saying that. I think everyone's very pumped about that. So maybe we can transition to talking a bit about how the merge is affecting your projects, how you're getting ready for it, what are the big changes that are coming. Maybe Seb, we could kick off with you. Like, how is Kiln? I know this because I work at Kiln. How is Kiln preparing for the merge?
So yeah, for the merge, we have been part of like all testnet merges so far. We are also part of the Sepolia testnet, which started a few weeks ago. But yeah, I think the main change for the infrastructure is kind of like a cost change, because like so basically pre-merge, you can have like the beacon layer just be connected to one or two nodes from the execution layer, because they only need to get the information about the stakes that are being made on Ethereum 1 to be able to import them into the consensus layer. But post-merge, there will be like a very tight relationship between the execution layer and the consensus layer, because, well, all blocks are going to be built by, the consensus layer. And so what this means concretely is like the number of nodes you will need to run, like execution nodes, is going to basically almost double the cost of infrastructure. And so, yeah, there is kind of like optimizations and like, yeah, choices to remake, to adapt to the merge. Yeah.
Nice. And on a DVT side, can you talk a bit about how you guys are preparing? Maybe Alon, we could start with you this time.
So I think the foundation was very smart in that the merge itself, the impact it has on the end user is relatively small for the changes behind the scenes. I think the more interesting things happen when you're talking about the actual applications doing staking. So how do you distribute rewards? How do you handle MEV and all of those types of things? That has a bigger impact actually on something like DVT, because it adds a bunch of different conditions and rules operators and nodes need to actually take into consideration. I think the second thing, which is a bit longer term, is the merge will bump the rewards significantly. And that will mean more validators. And so everything down the pipeline means that it needs to handle scale in a different way, especially if the future is, hopefully a significant part of the staking going through something like SSV or DVT. Then you need to handle scale. And so that, I think those are the big kind of things that impact us.
Yeah, and Colin, and also maybe if you could touch on MEV and how that might interface with the setups of DVT.
For us, like in my opinion, DVT it's still in its like early days. There's only 2 projects working on it. If you look at like what happened to rollups, now there's 10s plus projects working on it. So ultimately, I think like the merge will help people be interested in the technology more, and it also comes down to it being tested. So the technology, in my opinion, needs to be tested at scale in like a recreate a mainnet-like situation and then attack net style environment, which we haven't like seen yet in something as Obol the project we're working towards. Stealing people's time for testing is very interesting because most people are focused today on 2 things. One is MEV boost for right reason, and including that like into their stacks, into their production environments, and testing that pre-merge. For us as a project, we've chosen to be a post-merge technology for that reason, including like this another like middleware component inside of this technology stack. From our experience, is a bit too much for everyone. So for us, like now that the merge is here, that's great for us. We rolled out public testnet on Monday of this week for people to start onboarding now that the merge is getting closer. And on the talent front, we will be hiring more aggressively now, the talent that helped bring the merge to be. So for us, the merge has kind of held us back, honestly, from what we want to do, but for good reason, because these things need to kind of come in phases. So they've done a lot of great testing pre-merge. We've done mostly just DevNets pre-merge, and then post-merge is when we'll actually test the lights out of this thing. and see like what type of benefits does it actually draw. Like DVT and correlated slashing or surround voting is like quite interesting. The technology has been designed to alleviate or prevent that, but if it's being used at mass scale, like one of the things we don't know with DVT yet is like what are the centralization concerns of DVT, right? We're seeing like
introducing a new middleware component.
correct. Like what not only what are the economics of middleware, but like what are the centralization risks of middleware and like how much state can sit on a certain middleware. But again, we need to get through the MEV topic. We need to get through the merge topic, and then we'll like bolt on DVT inside of that, and then we'll see how it goes.
Awesome. So September 20th, we can start testing.
I hope it goes down at ETH Berlin. I'm really pushing for the merge happening in ETH Berlin. I think it would be like historic and epic. And we'll do some testing pre that. We'll activate most of our validators the first week of August, but we won't pull them out of the network until after the merge.
Cool, makes sense. And Elias, on your side, for Rated, how is the merge affecting your product strategy?
Our goal here is to primarily help spur this conversation forward and give better and quicker feedback to DVT, to pools, to users, to infrastructure providers. So with the execution layer sort of merging with the consensus layer, we already have a pretty good context on what's happening in the consensus layer, and both in the way that we're expressing it and that we're ingesting it. Our big goal is to actually contextualize the execution layer stuff really well. So starting from transaction fees, going into MEV, figuring out what's the baseline MEV in blocks, and then what could be the maximum potentially down the line, also classifying it. So our explicit goal is to be ready to do like a very good baseline of all of those things. And in scope of that as well, we're working on developing support for Prater. Our friends from the SSV DAO have supported us with a grant to do that, which is pretty awesome. And all these things are pretty synergistic, and I hope that we indeed actually stand up to the occasion and offer value to all the great folks around us.
I think that one of the things that I'm seeing emerging is the ability to kind of not divide and conquer, but really kind of adds kind of metadata on top of the network and understand what's happening underneath, which operator works on what, how they operate, like simple, really simple stuff. What is the latency on a certain operator? Like those things are crucial if we're talking about inclusion distances in attestations or catching up MEV. This is all has to do with latency. And we just don't have that data anymore. One of the things that if you take DVT and make it a network out of it, you can sniff out the communication, and you can see exactly what everyone is doing. And so I think that this will also kind of separate between operators that want to remain private, which in some applications it's okay. But again, if we're talking about Ethereum, systemic risk on Ethereum, and in general, a community-driven project like Ethereum, that cannot be the majority of operators. We need to understand what's happening underneath. We need to understand who is working well, what is the level of centralization on top of different operators. That can change dramatically how people choose operators. Today, you're choosing them basically on how expensive they are. But if you know one operator is holding 30%, 40% of the entire network, maybe that will change the way you think. And I think that it also influences, the application on top. And so having that metadata be readily available it's absolutely crucial.
Very cool. Last question from me, and then you guys should think of questions. We have 5 minutes for questions from the audience after this. So what's your, if we're in the final stretch of the merge, what's your call to action for builders and for the community to get ready? Or I guess, you can turn this onto your specific projects. What is your general call to action to the community?
I would say ignore Obol and just upgrade your nodes. That's the most important thing you can do.
Cool. Yeah, I would say the same, and double check your configuration of, like we had some misses during the Sepolia merge. So very simple config changes. Just look at the changelog of your validators and yeah.
Be alert. I suppose. Yeah.
Just generally alerts.
Yeah. We've seen like, I'm not super intimately aware into kind of like the nooks and crannies like Seb is, but I remember it was last year when Kusama was upgrading and it was bringing on parachain. So like a different scale, different scope, but like equally sort of in that specific context important upgrade. And it was messy. It was 6 weeks of upgrades, downgrades on Fridays, on Sundays, because it's distributed networks and they don't really work on a 9 to 5 schedule. But there's real people behind the machines, right, and operating those. So just I guess be alert and courageous and excited. So yeah, that's my call to action.
I think, look, anyone who's been in the industry for a while, I've been since 2012, so this is the biggest event in crypto you'll ever see. There is not going to be, unless it's going catastrophically wrong. So in that case, everything I say is not relevant. But if it does go well, this is the only, in my opinion, the only time in our lifetime that a big chain will basically change its entire infrastructure. It's not going to happen anymore. It's going to be too big. Nobody will do that in the future. It's just going to be too risky. And so you wanna say I've been there, right? Unless it fails, and then you want to say I wasn't there. I had no part in that.
Fair play. Okay. So now we have time for questions. Does anyone have any questions for our panelists? Yeah. Do you want to shout it out? Does that work?
Yeah, sure. 30, 60, or 30, 90, and 180 days. 30, 90, and 180 days post-merge. What is the what are your sort of expectations about the networks, the like percentage of the network that's staked, and what are the constraints in either direction? So like one constraint to the downside could be the the validator queue or something like that, or there might be factors to the upside as well. Like, so give your sort of projection, and then also share what factors are leading you in that direction.
Can I start? All right,
Yeah, go for it.
I'll start. So I believe there's only about like 9 or 10% of the Ether in circulation that can be onboarded onto the Beacon chain in any given year. So maximum, the like top line scenario is the 5%, right, in the 180 days. And to answer kind of like your other checkpoints down from that, I expect more demand for staking than we've seen. So kind of the activation queue just growing longer and longer and longer. It will obviously be mediated by macro and like how people feel about the market and so on, but like there's a very significant risk factor that is just being removed, right? And we're like one big benchmark closer to actually withdrawals being enabled, right? So with all that risk kind of removed from the equation, then I think it's very likely that you'll see kind of demand increase. And that's like in my mind, it's always been like a really interesting opportunity for liquid staking pools, right? Because getting the actual derivative of the pool is almost like renting space on the Beacon chain. And so to me, it will be really interesting to see how that market dynamic actually evolves.
Anyone else want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a great PR moment for everything that's been done in the past 2 years. I can tell you that when the Beacon chain was first launched, a lot of the people didn't notice like until a week or two later, which was, it is what it is. I think that the merge is, a lot of people will ask why weren't withdrawals part of the merge, for sure. But 180 days after the merge, I'm hoping to hit withdrawals, or at least very near withdrawals. And I think that will complete a major milestone for everyone. You'll be able to stake, you'll be able to validate transactions, you'll be able to get out. And that's like a really big thing. I think we'll see probably less stake going in if withdrawals are enabled, because I think you'll see a lot of stake going out and in. But other than this, I think this is a really good PR moment for Ethereum as a whole. And the sad part is, I don't know if there's a Bitcoin maximalist here, but I think that post-merge, Bitcoin is going to look very old. And that's, depends on where you're at and how much Bitcoin you're holding. That's either sad or happy, but I think that's going to mark a very distinct line in the sand where things are headed.
Thanks. That was a great question. Any other question? Oh, you wanted to add something. Sorry.
So with the entry delay, I think that's the biggest thing that we'll see. And the secondary thing that we'll see is like derivative assets increase in price. Most of them have been trading at a discount for a variety of like different fungibility properties. But really like from a long-term perspective, like they will trade at a premium most likely because there will always be an entry delay. On the sidelines, there's loads of ETH waiting to be staked, tons of it. Like most of the biggest piles of ETH have only staked a portion of theirs. And as a result of that, those two things I think will happen the most. I'm with Alon on the fact that withdrawals are more important and will bring like a catastrophic change to the entire product landscape. 180 days, fingers crossed. I mean, some of it's still being spec'd. Some of it has being started, but like withdrawals, I don't think will really get addressed from a mindshare perspective at the code layer and speccing layer until we actually merge. But when withdrawals do take place, it's the #1 opportunity for protocols to get vampire attacked. It's a #1 opportunity for people to like short derivative assets or do different types of things in the market. So there'll be like a variety of different activities that take place. Post withdrawals for us as a project is like where we think the most exciting action is happening, because a lot of people today are building new products and the best chance of them coming in and stepping into an existing mature market that's been around for almost 2 years is upon withdrawals. So they have a chance to steal market share for the very first time. So there'll be loads of stealth projects. I actually see vampire projects forming. Like there'll be a lot of cool things that take place post withdrawals.
Awesome. Anyone have another question? Okay, then maybe we can wrap it up here, open the windows a bit, take 5 minutes, and then we have our other panel kicking off soon. Thank you very much.